I wonder actually if you have become more pessimistic since writing the book in terms of global events since. I'm thinking particularly
Yes.
of the last month or so.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And actually, I'm specifically ready to answer that question because I've had to address it recently. You may or may not have seen about, I don't know when it was, about 2-3 weeks ago, I put out a tweet that went absolutely viral. I don't know how many, maybe 11, 12 million, views. It was everywhere, all around the world, where the valence of that tweet was exactly somber and pessimistic and dark. And what kind of took people back is that, I'm known as the happy warrior, right? I mean, I wrote a book on happiness. I'm always playing around. I'm always being sarcastic and funny, and I can be self-deprecating and joke around. I can be full grandiose and so on. And so here's this guy who's, whose whole personality is based on, being playful and so on. And yet this was very dark. And it was very dark, not because I was trying to be strategic and, having the tweet go viral, is because now, of course, what had triggered it is the post October 7th reality, where I saw that, it's one thing if you have these parasitic ideas, these dreadful ideas spreading. It's another thing to see that not only is the West doubling down on many of these ideas, there seems to be a complete reticence to actually, correct course, right? And so, when October 7th happened, one of three things can happen when it comes to the level of Jew hatred, the level of global Jew hatred. I mean, there's only three possibilities. Global Jew hatred can go up, global Jew hatred can stay the same, or global Jew hatred can decrease. Well, if 12 to 1,400 people were decapitated, raped, put in ovens, gang rape, whatever, we can decide what happened. It doesn't matter. If the outcome of that grotesque reality is that this has led to an orgiastic increase in global Jew hatred, it's very, very difficult to then be optimistic about things. And it shows that, humans are a species that is a storytelling species. Narratives matter. And when it comes to at least this particular narrative, it doesn't matter if Jews are the victims, they're viewed as the oppressor. It doesn't matter, right? Even when the Holocaust happens, it turns out that they were using strategically the erasure of 6 million people to benefit them down the line. So even when they are exterminated, it's because they are really the oppressors. They are the ones who are benefiting from this. And so when I saw that, I said, look, this doesn't look good, because if you go see your physician and your physician, God forbid, or Darwin forbid, says, hey, you have stage 4 cancer, and these are steps A, B, C, and D that we have to take. And my answer is, well, first of all, there is no such thing as cancer, so I don't believe in cancer. Second of all, if there is cancer, it's the Jews who did it. And also, if there's a cure for cancers, it's probably the Jews who are withholding the cancer treatment, because that's how they increase the prices, because they are the heads of the pharmaceutical companies. But in any case, to prove to you that there is no such thing as cancer, I'm going to smoke 4 packs a day, and I'm going to inhale with deep inhalation from this asbestos bag. Well, then it looks like your time is up. And so to answer your question in a long-winded way, I have become exponentially more pessimistic. Now, that doesn't mean that the West will fall tomorrow, but it does mean that in 20, 30, 50 years, we will be astoundingly worse off than we are today, unless there is a cataclysmic change, not little changes, not the eradication of diversity, inclusion, and equity committees. I mean, that's nice, but that's Band-Aid little stuff. That's you fixing your dandruff when your hair is on fire. It requires a much bigger intervention, one of which might be, hey, it might be a good idea to revisit open border policies for countries.
I agree with you. And I also have seen the same exponential rise in alarm and pessimism among otherwise more sort of I don't want to say more happy-go-lucky commentators, as you say,
Right.
since October 7th, and I think appropriately so. I mean, thinking again about your point about anti-Semitism, actually, well, one, anti-Semitism actually seeming to increase post October 7th, and two, its remarkable consistency across time. Putting your evolutionary psychology hat on again, what do you think might explain why anti-Semitism is such a common phenomenon, and
Well,
not just in the Muslim world,
that's a
right?
fantastic question, but a complicated
Although
one.
particularly in, yeah, well, I mean, this is it. Let's go for it. I want to
All right.
know.
So there are different sources. So one thing that's been quite arresting since October 7th is the extent to which I've received Jew hatred, I mean, orgiastic Jew hatred, from completely different angles and different sources. So you got your standard, you know, Ahmad Muhammad writing to me and saying, you know, Jew this, Jew that. That's the Islamic sources. Okay, fine. I'm used to that. I'm from the Middle East. Got it. Then you get your leftist progressives, the you know, the students and professors in Near East Studies at Columbia and my alma mater, Cornell, who have been taught all this stuff about, you know, Jews are the oppressors, Palestinians are the noble victims, and therefore we hate the Jews because they're the oppressors. There's that angle, and then there's of course the Jews will not replace us kind of neo-Nazi white, quote, white nationalist types, and I've gotten it from all of them. And so the source, the genesis of understanding your question will vary depending on the source of Jew hatred. So it varies. In the case of the Islamic context, well, just read the Quran, read the Hadith, and read the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad, and do a content analysis, do an exegesis on that, you know, do a hermeneutic analysis on it, and then decide whether it says love the Jew or whether it says some really. Now, one of the reasons, by the way, why I'm a nightmare for a lot of these folks is because they can go to Louise Perry and say, yeah, but Louise Perry, she's British. She, you know, she doesn't know Arabic. She doesn't, right? It's a lot harder to go after Gad Saad, mother tongue Arabic, and say that bullshit, right? So therefore, I become a much more difficult problem to deal with because I come from that culture. I speak the language. I've been exposed to that. I had to leave the Middle East because of that. So you can't pull the same delegitimization tactics that you would on Louise Perry that you might on me. Maybe Douglas Murray can fall prey to it, but not me. So that's one. When it comes to more globally, why there is an orgiastic hatred of Jews. So here, it may be couched in an evolutionary angle or not. So we could either look at it from a proximate or ultimate perspective. So we know there is something called the self-serving bias in psychology, right? So when I did well on the exam, well, that's because I'm really smart and I studied hard. When I did poorly on the exam, well, that's because Professor Saad is an asshole and he's unfair. So therefore, I attribute failures externally and I attribute successes internally. And it turns out that that attributional style is very, very common to all people, except, by the way, clinically depressed people, which leads to a chicken egg question, which is it that because they have a more realistic attribution style that it predisposes them to becoming depressed, or is it that their depression causes them to be, you know, more accurate in their attribution style? And the research shows that, like many things, it's a bit of both. But okay, now why am I linking that to Jew hatred? Well, imagine if I now have a cause for all failures. Oh, my wife cheated on me. Well, obviously, the Jew is to blame. Why? Because the Jews are the ones who peddle pornography. And I think my wife must have been exposed to some sort of erotic novel or that. Who caused her to then go with the really sexy neighbor on this little dalliance? It's the Jew. Now, this one, I made it up hyperbolically, although it literally is at that level of conspiratorial thinking. But here's a literal one. I was sharing with someone on Twitter the identity of the rapists, you know, the grooming rapists across all of Britain. I mean, you certainly would know it, all over, up and down England, in many, many different cities at industrial scale level, right? Of young white British girls, right? Let me just kind of summarize their names. You ready? Ahmad Muhammad, Muhammad Ahmad, Ahmad Muhammad Ahmad, Ahmad Hussein Muhammad, Muhammad Ahmad Hussein Kbir. So I put all those. I said, I don't have enough progressive, highfalutin, sophistication to see what is the commonality across all these rapists. Could somebody maybe help me out here? And many, many people wrote back to me. And you know who was to blame for those rapes, Louise?
Was it Jews, Gad?
And do you know why?
No. Why?
Because it is the Jews that are the architects of the open door philosophy. So,
Oh, I see. So that was coming from the right-wing group.
So Ahmad raped your daughter, but Mordechai is to blame. It's very difficult to not be pessimistic about, the world when that happens, right? Because you would think, evolutionarily speaking, I've evolved the emotional system to have my ire triggered at the one who did me wrong. The guy who, Darwin forbid, rapes my daughter, I want to kill him. But it turns out he's not to blame. I need to be looking for Mordechai. He's the real problem. And so why am I saying all this? Because what you end up seeing is this universal mechanism by which you can always blame your failures at the individual level, at the societal level, always on the Jew. Now we could talk about, well, why is it the Jew that's the existential explanation for all my failures? But I think that's a very alluring trap to fall into, because most of us will have failures. It takes a lot more courage to blame those failures on me, and a lot more psychologically satisfying to blame the Jew who is behind all possible maladies.